festival they have an Halloween up at Harriman Park. Just before Lion Park, just before in the state park there that was, and those were very old people, and when they passed away, they donated it to the state.
Do we get to see Erickson?
Yes.
Oh,
The
God.
state showed that they didn't make it out of the state park.
Oh, nice.
And so we took a hayride through into where the buildings are and the buildings and the people there. Kids went in, got their candy.
How old are your granddaughters?
Yeah, it was really fun.
How old are your granddaughters?
12 and 6. My grandson's a bit too old for that now. They're 22, 20.
Oh, yeah. All right.
Welcome to
You said
the
the twins?
final seminar that we have for our hypnosis for pain management. Notice that the numbers have dwindled as we've gone forward. And one of the reasons, I'm sure, is because this stuff is difficult. Okay? The techniques that we're learning force us, in order to learn them and in order to utilize them, to confront pain. Okay? I mean,
That is physical or mental.
Physical or mental, either way. All right? As long as we are here and have an avatar like this, we are going to be confronted with serious kinds of emotional and physical distress. Okay? Most people are looking for something that is sort of the magic wand. And believe me, I wish I had one. Okay? Because it would really alleviate a lot of the suffering that we encounter. But there isn't a magic wand. The techniques that we're learning are simply the most powerful techniques that we have developed over the last 10 or 15,000 years. In the future, we may get better at it. In the future, we may, discover other elements of this. But right now, the hypnosis, the meditation, the understanding of the nature of reality are the tools that we have available to help us get through the inevitable pain and suffering which we will encounter. And it will continue to get worse. Guaranteed. So that's why we have to practice just the simple techniques that you've all learned. The relaxation, both the physical structure, the progressive muscular relaxation, as well as the other relaxation techniques. The simple hypnotic trance, the kinds of things that we've talked about, using the script, to sort of get an idea for the kinds of suggestions that we can embed to tell ourselves and others to help get through the pain and suffering. But there isn't a magic wand. We are going to be confronted with it over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. And so there isn't a simple solution. And people who are looking for one are going to be disappointed. That's just because, a lot of people will promise basically the moon, but they cannot deliver. Okay, Erickson himself, because of his polio, got it when he was 17, overcame it. It recurred, not quite as bad, but he was older at the time, he was about 50. And so it crippled him again, and he had to walk around with a cane, sometimes in a wheelchair. And for like the last 40 years of his life, he would have intense bouts of pain and depression that he would have to, literally struggle with, even with all of his knowledge and skill and ability. Okay? So just keep that in mind as you move forward. Practice the things that you have learned here until they are second nature, because the time to practice is now, not when you're in the middle of a crisis. Okay? In the middle of a crisis is not the time to be practicing, it's the time to be applying and utilizing as best you can. Also remember, our basic premise is that we need to learn these skills so that we can help not only ourselves but each other. Okay, that's very critical. The more people who know this and the more people who have experienced these kinds of skills, the better off the world will be as we move forward and face all of the difficulties that we will encounter. The stuff is out on the website. Is there anyone who needs to review that? How to get there? Anything? Okay, good. Are there any questions that you have in general or specifically about any of the earlier seminars? No? Okay, good. Just remember the basic key components: the relaxation, the suggestions, the use of the kinesiology test. If you're dealing with content, any kind of content, because you want to double check that it's okay for you or okay for the other person. So if you're dealing with content suggestions, just run it through that simple test and make sure that it is self-consistent with yourself or the other person. And that'll help protect against any kind of bad programming, bad suggestions, brainwashing, that kind of stuff. Okay? The concept of the avatar, the fact that we are not our bodies. These are very complex instruments which were essentially custom made for us, but we are not this very complex object. We are this thinking substance. There's something else out there. And part of what hypnosis does is allow us to begin to see how that operates, because as we distance ourselves in the hypnotic trance from the avatar itself, we'll begin to experience what it feels like to just be this non-local, non-temporal, non-material thinking substance. So we'll begin to recognize which side of the equation we're dealing with. Is it us, or is it the avatar in the external world? And that's critical in order to be able to sort of navigate through all of the difficulties we will encounter. All right? We're not this thing, it is ours, but we are not it. And when it finally basically stops working, we'll still continue. And if we have practiced these kinds of things, we will take with us everything that we have learned here, because we can do that. We're the ones who are synthesizing all of this experience. We're the ones who are putting it all together. We're the ones who are controlling the basic organization and structure of our experience. And so all of that will go with us. And the more we understand about that process, the easier it will be to make the transition as the avatar ceases to function, which is built in. It's built into this particular entity, this particular machine which we have. The other concepts that are important to remember would be that there are specific kinds of trance skills, and we're going to be reviewing those today, because those deep trance skills are actually how we create and organize our reality. We learn them early, and we apply them from the time we're very young to begin to create and organize our reality. If we are successful in applying those deep trance phenomena, those deep trance skills, then we grow up more or less non-neurotic. If, however, we encounter serious difficulties, as we saw from our psychoanalytic perspective, then we're going to run into some kinds of neurotic behaviors, some kinds of holdovers from those traumas that we were not able to negotiate and navigate successfully. And we'll be able to use the hypnosis to go back and correct that, to overcome it. All right, so any questions about that before we go on? All right, today we're going to conclude with the topic of everyday trance states. We have everyday trance states. Everything that we do is organized around one or more deep trance phenomena, or what we might call hypnotic skills, what we refer to as hypnotic skills. That's how we construct our experience. Okay? By using these hypnotic skills to filter the raw data that's coming into the avatar senses. Okay? And so we are constantly in a trance state. It's either a deliberate one that we create and utilize, or it is a reactive one that is in response to the external environment and its cues, its stimuli. All right, so we're just going to take a look step by step and see. Oh, I didn't need that. We're going to start with Johannes H. Schultz. He was the creator of a self-hypnotic technique, which he called autogenic training. Now, the actual autogenic training is just self-hypnosis. That's all it is. He just wanted a name for it so he could basically go out and sell it. Yeah. But it is self-hypnosis. It utilizes a couple of different modalities. One of the most interesting ones is that in the 20-minute trance state that they utilize twice daily, according to the protocol, what they do is they relax the large muscle groups, you know, the arm, right arm, left leg, left leg, and then the rest of the body in that sequence. And then they focus on feelings of warmth in the abdominal area, and after they've done that, they focus on feelings of cool in the forehead. Okay, so that's autogenic training. That's the basic fundamentals of it right there. A 20-minute self-hypnotic trance, progressive muscular relaxation to get into the alpha state, and then concentration on feelings of heat in the abdomen and concentrations of feeling of coolness on the forehead. All right, so you're dealing with all sorts of different modalities here, most of them kinesthetic. Okay, later on, if you wanted to, they add colors. They add visualization of colors, so you'll have the visual aspect as well, the visual image. Okay, and he noticed just from working with his self-hypnosis patients, as he was moving towards the development of autogenic training, that if they practiced it twice daily for 20 minutes, once in the morning, once in the afternoon, their physical and mental health improved. He didn't have to do anything else. There wasn't any, analysis, there wasn't any psychotherapy, there wasn't any of that. All he had to do was teach them how to do this, and then have them do it twice a day for 20 minutes each time. And they would automatically improve. Okay? So that's what we're looking at here. Now here's Milton Erickson. This was taken just right before he passed away in 1980. Notice that there's a dark blue and purple. He was colorblind except for the color purple. So since the purple was the only color he could see, everyone who wanted to bring him gifts or things would bring him things that were purple. So his office and his house were filled with all of these purple things. And he liked to dress in those colors as well because he could see them. He lived the last part of his life, well, most of his life, actually, his professional life in Phoenix, Arizona. So that's why he has that particular tie and everything. He moved there when it was a young, growing city. He talked about the common everyday trance state. And he would utilize that common everyday trance state in his therapeutic work. He would wait until the patient's eyes would begin to droop and their attention would begin to falter. You'd come into his office and he'd sit you down, and then you'd just talk, and he'd ask you questions and you'd respond, and at some point, you'd have this response. Your eyes would begin to droop, your energy levels would begin to fall, and your attention would begin to wander, and at that point, he would begin the induction routine. Because you're already going into a trance. And so he would just utilize that. The talk before that may be meaningless, or it may have some intentional purpose and structure that he had constructed. But that was not what the therapy was concerned with. He was just, basically marking time until the person went into this natural trance state, this common everyday trance. And it usually occurred between 30 and 45 minutes into the session. And then he would do the induction routine, take them down to as deep a level as he wished, provide the suggestions or visualizations or whatever he was going to do, and then have them return to normal wakeful awareness with an amnesia for what had just occurred. So from their perspective, they would start to get a little sleepy, their eyes would droop a bit, and then it would be over. Okay? Because they would have amnesia for what he actually did, what he actually talked about. And that seemed to have an added effect, sort of an additive effect, if they consciously were not aware of what went on during the trance session. Okay? So the thinking substance which they were was off here, out in its own realm, while the avatar was being, was in the hypnotic state and was being communicated with by Erickson. That's using our model. That's what was going on there. And so when the thinking substance comes back and reassociates with the avatar, there's a gap there. Okay? Now, if you're really slick like Erickson, he would begin the trance induction sort of in the middle of a sentence when he's talking to the person, induce the trance, bring them down, do what he's going to do, bring them back up, and then resume the sentence where he left off. So that there would be total continuity as far as the conscious person was concerned. okay? But for our purposes, the important point is that there's this common everyday trance that people go into regularly. Yes?
Is this the one you introduced last week? It says that you have that cycle?
Yes, and we'll talk a little bit more about it now. Yep. Okay? So Ernest L. Rossi was one of Erickson's colleagues and co-authors. They wrote several books together. He was watching Erickson do this. And he was, talking with Erickson about this common everyday trance. And so he began to watch for a pattern that occurred. And he noticed that there was, in fact, about a 90-minute cycle going on here. And he began to look elsewhere to see if this 90-minute cycle was repeated. And then he began to do further research into circadian and ultradian rhythms. And he discovered that there had been quite a bit of research since 1961 on ultradian rhythms. That is, rhythms that are shorter than the 24-hour circadian rhythm. So you have your 24-hour circadian rhythm, and then you have within that these various ultradian rhythms that are, sort of fit in with the circadian rhythm itself. And he suggested in a paper in 1985 that the common everyday trance state is the result of an ultradian rhythm with a 90-minute duration. So he said Erickson just simply by watching people recognized that sooner or later this ultradian rhythm is going to manifest itself, and that's when he can begin to utilize that as the common everyday trance. In the book, The 20-Minute Break, he popularized the idea. Okay, and here he sort of outlines the theory. He provides some context for it, and he suggests exactly what Schultz suggested. 2 20-minute breaks, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. Okay, so just take your ultradian break and go and basically meditate, do autogenic training, self-hypnotize yourself, daydream, power nap, whatever, for 20 minutes, once in the morning and once in the afternoon. Okay? Now, the efficiency experts who were running things back in the early part of the 1900s, they also discovered the same phenomenon, and that's why we have 2 coffee breaks, one at 10 and one at 2. They didn't understand the ultradian rhythms behind it, but they did recognize the fact that people started getting, dull around 10 o'clock, and then again dull around 2 o'clock. So they said, well, they seem to snap out of it after 20 minutes, so we'll just give them a 20-minute coffee break. And voila, you had more productivity in the workplace. Okay? So the ultradian rhythm, this 90-minute ultradian rhythm, Rossi points to the research that indicates that it's natural alpha state. So about every 90 minutes or so, we all enter an alpha state for about 20 minutes. So there's this 2-hour block, 90 minutes of alertness and 20 minutes of alpha. And so it is that 20 minutes of sort of enforced alpha state that Erickson recognizes the common everyday trance and will begin to utilize during his therapeutic sessions. Okay, so this is the neurophysiological basis for the common everyday trance. Now, Stephen Wolinsky, who is a psychiatrist, psychologist, and a neo-Ericksonian hypnotherapist, took Erickson's notion of the common everyday trance and he applied it to every experience that we have. He basically said, I was practicing, Ericksonian techniques, and people would come in and he would notice that they were already in a trance when they came in. And they were already zoned out and in a trance state. So he began to take a look at what was going on behind this trance state that was seemingly everywhere he looked. And so what he began to do was he began to take Erickson's idea, because Erickson would utilize the common everyday trance and then sort of piggyback on top of that all of the deep trance phenomena that he wanted to utilize in the therapeutic session. And he would get the ideas for which deep trance phenomena he was going to use from the person's conversation earlier. So the first part of it, he's sort of picking up cues, picking up clues about what is going on with the person with regard to these deep trance phenomena. Okay? And then he would, incorporate those in his trance work after the person was inducted into the trance. Okay? This book here was called Trance as People Live. Okay? The subtitle is Healing Approaches in Quantum Psychology. Okay, so he's basically doing the same thing that Schultz was doing. He's using something that is fairly common, which is just hypnosis, and he's stamping it with his own little terminology so he can sell it as his own. Okay? So that's what's going on here as far as that goes. Now we're going to take a look at this basically chapter by chapter as we examine the common everyday trance phenomena that we utilize continuously to create the experiences that we have. Okay? Any questions about all of this stuff? Okay, so we can utilize the 20-minute break. We can wait for that time, realize when it's happening, chart it, so we have an idea of the regularity of it. You know, take about a week and just notice when you feel this way. It's really apparent in the afternoon, usually. Typically, it's really apparent in that early part of the afternoon. You just sort of lose all your energy. You know, you're dull, and you don't want to move around or do anything, and that lasts about 15 or 20 minutes, and then you get your second wind, and move on, and everything is okay. Yeah?
Now, is this, every individual is different, or is this a generalization that most people are into the rhythm?
No, everyone has this rhythm.
Right, but, okay, I usually feel sluggish after lunch, and I
Right.
always blamed it on eating the food.
Food does have that effect as sort of the resources are diverted to digesting the food. Yeah, but that would be a manifestation of this particular rhythm.
Yeah, but you see, it was dictated by work. This is whether they gave me lunch at 11, 12:01, and this is, so the rhythm would be their induced one, or?
No, this is, the yours. You would have your own natural rhythm, whatever it happens to be.
So I would eat like this, and I wouldn't feel sluggish until it was my turn to feel sluggish.
Well, whatever your neurophysiology is doing, exactly. And as we statistically analyzed this, it appeared as if there were a 90 to 100 minute cycle in general. Okay, and not everybody, of course, is synchronized to that same 90-minute cycle. And it can vary. It can extend itself, you know, if we're busy engaged in something that captures our attention, or that's really important, we won't even notice it. And it will change the actual cycles for that day or maybe even the next day. Okay? So that's why I'm suggesting we chart it. Take a week or two and just don't try to impose anything on yourself, just notice. You know, when you feel that feeling, just jot down what time it was. And then when you come out of it, jot down what time that was. And over a week or two, you'll be able to actually see if there is a regular pattern in this occurrence. Okay? And then you'll be able to utilize that more regularly, more frequently, more easily. Okay? Find out what your rhythm is. Yeah?
When we went to Greece, well, we were there 2.5 weeks on a tour, and all the businesses closed down for 2 hours, from 1 to 3. And there was no way we could go shopping. We hated it.
Right,
And
right.
we didn't figure out why
Yeah.
they did that.
Yeah.
That must be why.
This is, you know, from the old times, and, you know, the Mexican siesta, you know, that same kind of an idea, is because the workers typically are, if you give them that 2-hour lunch break, when they return, they're usually pretty productive. Whereas if you know, for us, we tend to work right through lunch. You know, we tend to just eat and go right back to work, or even eat at work when we were working. You know, so we would just sort of run roughshod over these normal rhythms. Other cultures like, you know, Spain, Mexico, Greece, they actually have it sort of institutionalized in their daily rhythms. Yeah.
But most of that is, again, it's induced because their work day starts at 5. And the sun hits at noon, is just the hottest.
The hottest part of the day.
So everyone is supposed to go home, relax.
Exactly, relax, and then come back when it's cooler.
Cooler.
Yes, absolutely.
So, but they included our rhythm.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
that's why.
Yeah. Well, the rhythm is part of that. This is also the circadian rhythm, the rhythm of the sun as it moves across the sky. Yeah, exactly. And so the hottest part of the day, they would take off. Okay?
Okay.
Yeah, and we're not even, okay. The circadian rhythm is fairly easy to see where it comes from because it just follows the rising and setting of the sun. The ultradian rhythms within that, and there are several of them, not just this one, but there are others. That is a little bit more difficult to discover exactly what is going on there, what's triggering, why it evolved the way that it did.
Because it's individual.
Well, it's not just, everyone has it, it's just that, the circadian rhythms are obvious because they'll follow the sun, yeah, and the moon, the night. Whereas these, we just notice them and begin to utilize them, okay? Yeah.
So does everybody have like a different ultradian rhythm?
I mean, it will follow pretty close within that 90-minute cycle. So look at every 2-hour block that you have, and then just notice.
But I mean, this whole class is not going through the same.
No. Yeah, typically not unless we got up at the same time. Okay. If we all worked at the same place and all got to work at the same time, pretty much our ultradian rhythms would begin to synchronize. Okay, but in the general population, no. Okay, and so that's why you should map it. You should actually measure it and find out what yours is right now. And that way will just give you an idea of what's happening. Also, there will be, the early ones may be less obvious and less demanding than the later ones. So you begin to notice the intensity of the demand for this alpha state. Okay? Any other questions about that? Okay, everyday trance states. Basically, all communications are hypnotic communications, including this one. In order for you to process what I am saying, you have to basically enter an hypnotic trance, and you then are processing the words that you are hearing, and you are processing them visually, auditorily, and kinesthetically, and you're coming up with references to your own experiences, references to things that you're thinking about at the time. Whole bunches of imagery will happen that are, of course, unique to each individual. That's all the processing. That's all the hypnotic processing of these words in order to organize your experience and understand what is going on. Okay? So you are in a hypnotic state right now, and you are utilizing deep trance phenomena in order to organize your experience. Yeah?
Okay, I understand that part, but I sometimes zone out,
That's a dissociation state.
and that's still part of the process.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, zoning out means what you're doing is you're negatively hallucinating the external environment.
Yeah, I don't want to pay attention.
Yep,
to this
don't want to pay
or that.
attention, exactly.
So-
Yep.
Oh.
However, if you are following along to whatever's going on in the environment, there'll be that constant internal dialogue and a constant series of visual imagery that attends to it.
And then-
Okay.
And that's the hypnotic.
Those are all hypnotic phenomena, and the resulting state is an hypnotic state that is a combination of whatever hypnotic phenomena you utilize. Okay? So this is one of the things that Erickson was getting at. He's saying everybody is constantly in a hypnotic state, and all we have to do is utilize those particular moments when they enter an alpha, a dissociated alpha internally or focused state. Then we can lead them deeper into a deeper trance state and begin to run therapeutic techniques with them. But everything that happens to us is based on hypnosis, yeah.
How much of this is utilized in advertising?
Lots.
Okay.
Yep, in fact, all of it, because they will, if you were to go to Madison Avenue and take the courses that they offer for their copywriters and for their artists and for their basic design team, they would show you exactly how this process works, and they would utilize not only the hypnotic techniques and to incorporate in the auditory message and the visual imagery message, but they would also attach all sorts of psychodynamic processes to all of these things as well. So, for example, if you want to take a look at the kinds of subliminal processing that is triggered by advertisements, the best thing to do is to go back to the late 60s when there were a whole bunches of advertisements for cigarettes. This was before they decided that they really didn't need to waste all that money on advertising because they'd already addicted everybody. So they stopped spending money on advertising, mostly. No TV advertising, no radio advertising, still print advertising though. But back then you can go back and actually take a look at how it works. So, for example, if you want to sell a cigarette to somebody, you have to have an appealing visual image. So the actual image that is there is of a young couple, a young man and a young woman, who are out at night with their car in a sort of a wooded area with the sun, with the moon and the stars in the foreground out there. And so that's what you see if you just sort of look at it. You see this, young couple having a good time smoking cigarettes. Okay? But if you go back and take a look at the actual design process, what you will see is that this image is a composite of a number of different overlays that they have created along the path. So the first thing they do is they just basically outline the scene. Then the next thing they do is they overlay the two people with spiders. Okay? So the next plate that you see, they'll have the outlines of the people, the car, the people, the cigarettes, the motions of their hands, the fact that they're smiling. All of that will be sort of penciled in here, the moon and the stars and everything, the trees. And then the next thing they do is they would take a piece of vellum and put it over that, and they would trace the outline of spiders, big spiders, all over the two people. Okay? The spiders are something that we typically would not have, want to have crawling all over us. Okay? And if we get images of spiders crawling all over us, we get that really creepy feeling, okay? So that's the next overlay. Okay? Then the next overlay is to modify the postures of the people so that they are actually standing in positions which human beings cannot stand in, because it violates the anatomy of the body. So the knee joints will bend backwards, for example. The elbow joints will bend backwards. And they'll pencil in that. Okay? And then you'll have, in the background and the foreground, you'll have all of these other sort of creepy images that are just sort of penciled in, like in the stars and in the moon, the shadows on the moon and all of that stuff. And then what they do is they take it all together and they embed the spider images in the wrinkles and stuff of the clothing. And they embed the backward moving joints and stuff by sort of offsetting the perspective.
So you can look at these ads and actually see that.
If you know what you're looking for, you can actually look for it and see it. Yeah, in this case, what I'm telling, this came from an advertising training manual.
Yeah.
And it said, this is how you do it, this is one that we did, and this is how we did it. And so at the end, what you've got is you've got this picture. It's a full-color picture that apparently looks like these two young, happy kids who are happy because they're out in the woods together in love smoking cigarettes. Okay? But behind all of that is all of these creepy images. It's dark. There's spiders. There's, awkward poses, things like that, so the body is deformed. They're not looking at each other. Okay? So if they're in love, they're ignoring each other. There's all of these kinds of embedded subliminal imagery in that. And then at the bottom, there's 3 lines of text. And it basically says, this was a cool ad for cool menthol cigarettes. Okay? And basically it said, the message of the 3 sentences was, cool will save you. from the horrible spiders and the deformity of the body and all of these nasty feelings. Because everybody knows that smoking cigarettes is the most lethal thing you can do for yourself. So how do you overcome that? You don't overcome that. You emphasize the fact that this thing that you are doing is horrifying and is deforming your body and is, you know, putting spiders all over you and everything else. But then in the message, the text message, you nullify that and say that it's actually going to make you feel better. So now you've got associated with cool all of the things that you know are true about it, all these horrible achy things, but you've also got the message that you consciously perceive that says cool is good. Cool is cool.
But the message,
Okay? Yeah.
the message isn't just words, it's comes on so fast that your subconscious sees it, right?
Yes. Remember that the nervous system can process data at 3 milliseconds. That's the threshold.
Yes,
Any-
you don't
anything-
know that you see
Exactly.
that.
Right. You can. I mean, you're thumbing through the magazine. You don't even
Yeah.
stop to look at it. I mean, and it's past. But your nervous system, the unconscious mind, the avatar has processed all of those images in 3 milliseconds.
So,
And acts upon
so
it.
that's in a magazine?
That's in a magazine.
Well, then you could stop and look at it.
Sure,
I
you can
thought it
stop
was
and look
something
at it.
on the screen.
On the screen, it's even worse. Yeah, it's faster, and it's also, you got more pixels to work with. You got more stuff to deal with on the TV screen, and even more on the huge, 70 millimeter film screens, and even more with 3D, 70 millimeter 3D. Now you're cramming much more data into that 3 millisecond image. Okay, so yes, so in answer to your question, yeah, Madison Avenue knows all of this, and they utilize it to sell us stuff that we don't need. Okay? Yeah, basically that's what they did. At the end of the 19th century, the industrial capacity of the industrialized world was far exceeding the demand. I mean, we could create Model Ts, but no one could afford to buy them. Okay? Because we were still operating, culturally and economically, we're still operating in the 19th century. So they said, wow, this is no way to run a business, so let's create a need, let's create demand, let's create the consumer society. So they went to people like Edward Bernays, who was Freud's nephew, and said, create for us a method of advertising and population control, mind control, so we can create an entire culture of industrialized consumers who will buy the stuff that our industrial machines are producing. And so that's what they did. And this is how it works, by using all of these subliminal techniques. I mean, the reason they fund all of this psychological research is not so that they can make us better, it's so that they can sell us stuff. That was the initial motive, was so that they could have us there. I mean, how do they sell us makeup for the girls? How do they sell us deodorant? How do they sell us toothpaste? By making us feel as if we are ugly and stinky and have bad breath unless we use this stuff, even if it's not true, okay? Even if there are other ways of achieving hygiene than the things that they want to sell us. But they do it by attacking our basic self-image, and they do it through all of these subliminal methods.
Seduction.
Subliminal seduction, in fact, was the name of a really good introductory book written by Wilson Bryan Keith, who's a professor of psychology up in Canada. I think he's probably retired by now. But he was the first one. This book was called Subliminal Seduction, and on the front of it is a picture of a photograph of a glass of liquor. Okay? And if you take a look at it, and he analyzes the photo, what the cigarette manufacturers are selling creepiness, okay, and bad body image. What the alcohol businesses are selling is pure raw death, because what you have embedded in all of the shadows inside of the ice cubes are images of death's heads. okay, and images of car crashes, and images of decapitated bodies. So that's what they're putting in there. In order to do that, what they do is they create the photograph of the product with an ice cubes inside of the glass, and then they take that and they blow it up and they begin to airbrush very carefully all of these images inside of the ripples in the liquid, and inside the shadows on the glass, and inside all the shadows that are made by the ice cubes. And so these are the subliminal images that sell alcohol.
Why would that make you want to buy alcohol?
Because remember Freud said we have a death instinct. Okay, there are two things that drive us according to the psychoanalysis. Eros, which is the love instinct, the life instinct, sex, and thanatos, the death instinct, violence and aggression, death, destruction. Those are the two instincts which drive humans. So what you have is a combination of those two that are then combined. In our cigarette ad, we have the two lovers. So we've got that, we've got the sex right there, and then behind the scenes, subliminally, we've got all the death and destruction and creepiness. Okay? In the ads for the alcohol, what we have is we have the picture of the product, we have embedded all sorts of death's head images, decapitated bodies, skeletons, ghosts, even, Grim Reaper kinds of things. And then embedded within the text and within some of the other elements of the image, we have the word sex, S-E-X, embedded all over the place. 5, 10, 15, 20, 100 times. So you have those two elements. And of course the actual ad is going to show what? What are the people doing in these alcohol ads? Well, they're having a great time. Okay? I mean, the Coors beer ads, the Keystone beer ads, what do you see? You see a bunch of men hanging out with scantily clad, really good-looking young women. As if, opening a beer is going to have all of these young women just attack you. So that's all in the open. That's all what you see. And then behind the scenes are all of these subliminal things. Yeah.
How have they figured out how small we can still perceive things?
Yes, they have. Yeah, and it's down. We can actually perceive, the human eye can perceive, it can perceive changes in the visual environment that are the wavelength of one photon.
Really?
So if you're with the dark adapted eye, in a completely dark room, you can actually perceive a single photon emitted from a light emitter. That's how sensitive the eyes are. So, the original TV screen, of course, was very small, and it had, I can't even remember how many it was. I can't even remember how many images it had. The standard one that we grew up with in the 60s, it was about 640 lines. And the way that the electron beam works, it starts off at this side and runs across and then down and back, so it's constantly scanning back and forth. And just illuminating all the pixels out there, all of the little dots on the screen. So then we got color, and now instead of having one dot, there's 3 for the colors. And then instead of having just a regular thing, we have big screen. And then instead of having just that, we have high definition big screen. Okay, each time getting more and more smaller and smaller pixels, dots that we can then respond to. I mean, you have no idea how much information can be programmed into a single HD snapshot of an image, because the human nervous system can pick up each of those pixels and process the individual data that's related to them. And then you add 70 millimeter surround sound 3D, and each one of those is another layer that they can begin to communicate with the nervous system. Okay? So you see how we swim in this ocean of information that is being manipulated, deliberately manipulated.
How do we keep from just going out and buying everything?
Well, sometimes we don't. Okay? We've all had that experience. We bought stuff that we do not need. We bought stuff that we don't want,
Oh, yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, we've actually let people come into our homes and sell us stuff that we would not buy because they're utilizing these techniques. So we have to be on guard. We have to be, in fact, let me rephrase that. We don't have to be on guard. We have to be vigilant, and we have to be aggressive, and we have to be nasty and mean in order to protect ourselves from this kind of an assault. Okay, there was a study in 2007 or 2008, I can't remember when it came out, and they estimated that there were a minimum of 100,000 impacts, 100,000 attempts to influence us every single day. And that has now gone up because, you know, they're putting up TV screens everywhere. And so now they're going to be doing that. So we're constantly barraged with all of this stuff. And it is not benign. It is not just random entertainment. It is very sophisticated, highly weaponized, highly designed, you know, messages to have us do things. So our best bet is to practice these kinds of techniques, withdraw from it, and get some insulation so that we can begin to see how we respond to these kinds of things. And so and once you know how it's done, I mean, you know, once you pull the curtain back and see the wizard there, basically, you know, you now know what to look for. Even as sophisticated as it's getting, you still know the basic principles. And you can begin to look for it. Yeah, then.
Lon, compare PBS and say CBS or NBC
Oh,
for exposure.
yeah, PBS. PBS was created by the Congress way back when in the 60s in order to provide a channel that could for all apparent purposes be non-commercial. Okay? Now, as we know, if it appears to be one thing, it's usually not that. It's usually the opposite of that. And so what you have is you have very interesting programming going on inside of PBS that is funded by the large corporations and the large foundations. So it's basically the large foundations network. And they put stuff on that is designed to further their agendas. Now, if you take a look at Fox News, especially Fox, I really like Fox because they do it upright. Okay? And they're out in front with it all. Who they got in front of the camera? Who they got right there sitting behind it? They've got these really, really, really pretty, intelligent, highly qualified women who are trained to look into that camera lens and talk right directly to you as if they are, you know, as if you're having this very intimate conversation. Okay? And it works. And that's what they do. They all look the same, except for the hair color. Okay? And they all have, you know, magnificent credentials. They're lawyers. You know, they're other professionals that have come into the Fox broadcasting centers. Okay? So that's what you get if you take a look at ABC, CBS, Fox, CNN, and everything else. What do you get when you listen to PBS? Especially PBS radio. Okay? What does it sound like? Dull. Why dull?
Because you can't see.
Well, not only that, but it is very, very, very quiet.
Yes,
Very polite.
Low key.
Low key, just like Erickson's hypnosis induction. That's exactly what you're doing there. They are hypnotizing you with their voice. It's non-confrontational, and it's very reasonable, and it's very slow. And it's very almost emotionless. And it's so, you know, pleasant and quiet. And then you hear a little bit of Mozart, and, you know, you think you're getting culture, and blah, 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 blah. Then they bring on the news, and it's so the same thing, but they're telling you how to think. They're telling you how to vote. They're telling you what to believe. Okay? And because we all want to think that we're cultured, and because we all want to think we're smarter than the next guy, we listen to PBS. Okay? I'm not one of those riffraff that listens to Fox, watches those babes. I listen to these people over on PBS because I'm intellectual. Okay? So, it's all the same game, and it's all the same control mechanism, and it's all funded by the same people. And it all utilizes exactly the same hypnotic techniques to achieve the same goal. Okay? We have to recognize that. We are living in the middle of the most complex scientific tyranny the world has ever seen. In 1953, Bertrand Russell gave a series of 8 lectures to the up-and-coming leaders over in Britain. And he opens the first lecture by saying, and the collection was called The Effect of Science on Society. The Impact of Science on Society. And so he opens it up by saying, you know, if Napoleon's secret police had had the scientific technology that we have now, we would all be speaking French. Okay? Because they had to go out and actually spy on people physically if they wanted to get information. They had to set up these complex spy networks to go out and have everybody spy on each other. And since everybody knew what they were doing, it was pretty easy to evade and to avoid and to recognize, because you could see it coming a mile away. So they only had about like a 3% efficiency rate. And that 3% was enough to, make Napoleon the danger that he was, and make him the emperor of France and that huge expanding empire that he had. Okay? So imagine that kind of a situation with all of the technological advancements that we have now in 1953, is what Rossi is saying. And he's saying we will utilize all of these techniques, all of the film, all of the TV, all of the radio, all of the psychology, along with the needle, along with food, along with propaganda, along with all of these other things, the spy satellites and the phones that track where you're going, and the smartphones, of course, have apps that you download, some of which you even pay for, whose user agreement, if you take a look at the end user agreement, specifically says, we are going to turn on your camera, and we're going to turn on your phone and your microphone, and we're going to capture everything that you do, and we're going to sell it. That's in the end user license agreement for every app that you download on your smartphone. Okay, this one is a dumb phone, but it still tracks my every movement, and it still has a microphone that they can turn on remotely. Okay, so imagine Napoleon's police state with this kind of technology, is what Bertrand Russell was saying. That was in 53, so that was, 60 years ago?
Before digital.
Yeah, way before digital. And then if we fast forward a little bit to 1958, we get Aldous Huxley appearing on, a CBS program where he talks about the encroaching tyranny, about the scientific tyranny. And then in 1962, he goes and lectures to Berkeley, the University of Berkeley, where he basically says, yeah, we've been engineering this the whole century, and there's, it's here, it's done, it's a done deal, there's no way to get away from it, and you all are part of it, whether you like it or not. And then he passed away just shortly after that lecture. So, this is the way that they control and manipulate us. They manipulate our emotions, they manipulate our instincts, they manipulate the actual way that we process information. They do all of that stuff. And, back in Aristotle's time, it would have been fairly subtle, and you'd show up at the theater to watch the play, and that would be your mind control, your program. Now, of course, it's everywhere. 100,000 hits a day minimum, probably more now because of all the additional channels that we have available to us. It's in the video games, it's in the movies, it's in the TV programs, it's in the advertisements, it's in the text. Okay, they actually go to school to learn how to write propaganda pieces to control and shape and manipulate opinion. So if you take a look at articles, any article that's written, you will be able to see these basic propaganda principles repeated again and again and again and again and again. And you'll be able to see how they are subtly beginning to shape your opinion. Okay? Even in text.
Well, that's a college education.
What's that?
Learning how to spin.
Oh, it's
Anytime you hand in a paper,
yeah.
it was always geared to the teacher, dislikes,
Sure,
to get that A.
sure.
And
Exactly.
And the more you go to it, they encourage college education.
Yes, and this, of course, is postdoctorate stuff. You're not going to get this unless you go to Harvard, and you're going to pay about $80,000 a semester.